we are going to be a white minority very, very soon. I'm okay with that. To me, change is opportunity. And this country has evolved via change every year of its existence since 1776. And
that's not the perspective that's had from, the more traditionalists or what you would consider the nativists or things like that. Their thing is like, there was a golden age and then non-real America showed up and has slowly corroded what were our core values.
Well, there's a reason why the word conserve is in conservative.
Right.
There are always going to be people who don't want change. But just look at how much has changed among the things that we thought would never change, from pot to, gay weddings to you name it. The list is long. It takes time. When you look at anything at one given snapshot, it always looks really, really painful. But when you take a longer term horizon, you see progress. And, Father Time is undefeated.
Right. It's interesting. They always talk about the arc of the moral history is long, but it bends towards justice. But I think they never tell you but there's going to be a pretty substantial group that's trying to bend it back the other way.
Yeah, of course.
And it's going to be that push and pull that creates it. Why do you think the boardroom is so resistant to that kind? Because man, if there is a Maginot line that's sort of standing sentinel in front of it, it's a boardroom. Because it seems to me like there's structural issues still.
Of course there's structural issues. It's very simple. Who wants to give up their spot? Oh, by the way, John, you're on our board. You're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in cash and stock. You want to quit now so we can make room for somebody else?
Board?
Yeah, just to be on the board and make a few phone calls and be there and show up via Zoom now. You don't even have to go to Las Vegas or Arizona for the meeting.
I'm honored that you asked me to be on the board. I'm happy to do it. I'm delighted. What an exciting time.
Yeah, and we can and should make that accommodation to make sure that we're expanding diversity because it's good business. It's not like, okay, let's just make it look good out there. Let's just virtue
You're not
signal,
talking about making a moral decision. You're talking about making an efficiency decision, a capital decision, and a business decision. Look at it.
Right. I mean, look, if people of color are going to be the majority in this country, and we want our product to reach the majority of this country, you want people who have a stronger connection than somebody who looks like me. Finding people who look like me is easy.
Oh no, I know that. I see you everywhere. I see you all. I see you all over the place. Do you think, it brings up an interesting point though, because we're talking about such a skewed reality of between billionaires and the people that support the teams, right? And it kind of brings up, is part of the problem maybe with the makeup of the American economy in general, that we've gone too far to make sure that Facebook can keep their last 10 billion, but maybe what we should be doing is lowering the bar of entry and making softer landings for risk-taking and entrepreneurship. In other words, rather than protecting success at its highest level, right? Be more cognizant of entrepreneurial spirit and giving more agency to individuals. In other words, when you start a business, that's a big risk. And the regulatory regime and all the other things that are a much bigger burden to small businesses, why aren't we more concerned about lowering the ante?
Yeah, there's a contradiction in there on the lower end, in that being broke is the best time and best position to be in to start a business, because you have nothing to lose. And so the marginal cost for starting a business these days in tech is next to nothing. If you have a phone, access to a laptop, and access to broadband, you can start anything, particularly with the crypto revolution going on now. I mean,
but those businesses are accessible to a certain class, right?
No. One of the reasons I do Shark Tank is because kids watch and start businesses, and I try to be accessible. And just using the laptop in their school to start something online and write software that they put on Hopscotch or Roblox and make some money from that. Now, if I want to start a business and I'm in a low income community, where the friction lies isn't so much what you do if you fail. Where the friction lies is they don't have access to lawyers and accountants to go through all the paperwork and understand how the banking system works. So we have done a really poor job of educating kids in those situations on what a credit card is, what a bank account is, how to deal with money at all. And they don't have that fundamental understanding. And so to me, it's not so much a safety net if somebody fails. It's more, okay, what are the inhibitors in terms of licensing requirements? Like, I don't know if it's still there, but there was a point in time where you had to have 2,000 hours of shampooing experience in Louisiana in order to be considered an assistant, a shampooer, right? And you're not going to be able to start a salon.
Well, let me tell you something.
You've got to go.
You
through all
don't want
that
some
bullshit.
motherfucker with only 1,000 hours of shampooing.
Right?
Shampooing your hair. They might even know where your head is.
It's ridiculous. The few times I've talked to governors or politicians, that's always my number one thing. The licensing requirements are a joke. And it's not only the biggest and the richest trying to protect their positioning. It's the people who are at the bottom that can look at people of color and realize they don't have the foundational business education and find ways that to exclude them, and those people won't even realize they're being excluded. It'll just be when they go to start a business, there's all these licensing and registration requirements, and because they don't feel comfortable with them and they can't afford to hire them. So the number one answer to your question is, how can we stop that cycle, right? And stop it and make it so you just go to a website anywhere, fill out a form, and boom, you're ready to go to work.
When I talk about the bar of entry and lowering that, everybody says you need a college education, right? Well, college education in this country, so that means the ante to just get into the world is $150,000.
Yeah.
I was talking to Janet Yellen, right? Secretary of Treasury. And we were talking about different companies and how they operate. And I was saying, Walmart pays such low wages that taxpayers subsidize their workforce. And so I said to her, I go, and they're making billions in profits, but we're subsidizing that. Why can't we, the capitalist system, we don't want to force them to do certain things. We say, well, but we're subsidizing their workforce. Why not just subsidize? If you're going to subsidize social services, subsidize their wages. It's sort of that difference between Walmart and Costco.
I literally went through with the Mavs and the American Airlines Center, and I said, is it possible we can find out if any of our employees are on government assistance? Because to me, it's the most embarrassing thing in the world that somebody that works for me that I'm supposed to be paying enough can't live their own life, right? And is required to go on government assistance just to live. Now, and the reality was employees didn't want to say, right? We couldn't find out for sure, but we gave raises to everybody, and this was a few years ago. We went to a minimum of 15 and it's gone up since then. But you're right, and I've seen that data on Walmart employees where some significant percentage is on government assistance.
So I said, what do you do with that? And she said, well, the important thing is to educate people so that they can get a different job. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, they fucking live there. They live there.
Yes.
This is their job.
Yes.
They live there and they don't have the wherewithal to spend a year. They got 2 kids. They're trying to struggle with childcare. And that's what I mean by lowering the bar of risk taking. If you stay in a shitty job because of all these other things, why aren't we supporting childcare? But let me ask you a question about health insurance. Why the fuck is health insurance tied to your job? Isn't that one of the greatest limiters to freedom and liberty we have in this country? That you have to make a decision to stay in a shitty situation because you're worried that your kids won't be able to go to the doctor.
I've been funding these studies, and I'll just give you a quick example where I said, look, Canada, if you go to a hospital in Toronto, the cost of real estate is the same as a hospital in New York, maybe even more expensive. Doctors, you pay the same wages. Nurses, you pay the same wages. You pay the same for Band-Aids. You pay the same for beds, everything. Why is it that of the top 35 procedures done at a hospital in Toronto, they can charge less than Medicare rates? And every hospital says, you know what? We lose money on Medicare rates, which is a lie, but they say it. And the reality is we don't look to see how we can make things better. I wanted to pay for another study that says, go and ask all the major hospital systems, just ask them what kind of accounting they use to determine their cost. None would respond. Not one single hospital.
Well, if you go to the hospital just a mile from my house and you get a procedure done, and you go to a hospital, 20 miles away, it's a completely different pricing system. But nobody's comparison shopping. They're just going to whatever's closer.
I do, right? So I had to get a colonoscopy, and I decided I wanted to get a CT colonoscopy, the digital version, right? So I called around, and my insurance company price was like $2,200. I got a price for $600 right now. Not everybody can afford to write a check for $600, but most people have a deductible. So chances are it's costing you one way or the other.
Now, when you're a guy with you have as much money as you have, are you like, give me 5 of them? Give me 5 fucking digital colonoscopies.
Not directly, but yeah, they know I'm coming back now. They know I'm a regular customer every couple of years when I got to get it done. And it's a short piece of hell if someone sticks a stick up my ass.
I didn't even know you could do it. I've never even heard of a digital colonoscopy. And as you can tell by my age, I could use a couple.
We both know. We both know. So I just wanted to explore my alternatives. But yeah, I mean, the point being that, I was talking to a hospital yesterday and they were talking to me about these mental health solutions they're offering. And the first thing they said was they built a building to support all this. And then they asked, okay, what do you think is the best way to market? I said, well, the first thing you do is you sell that motherfucking building and you use that money to offer mental health services. There's just the incentives between the payers, which are the insurance companies, and the providers, the hospitals, are aligned, but they don't align with the patients. Because the way Medicare is set up with medical loss ratios and all this other bullshit, the higher they can charge you, the more money they both make to the bottom line. I could just go on for days.